This is entitled Bridge Maintenance Training Opportunities. I say opportunities sometimes because you got to kind of make them a little bit. There are things out there that you can avail yourselves of if you're into the concept, the thought that you need some training. And some of that is kind of sometimes you got to figure that out, whether you need it or not, or what your crews are doing. So what we're going to talk about is why is bridge maintenance training necessary? I don't think I really have to go over that with you folks. There are innovations going on all the time. There are shared practices. There is a knowledge base that sometimes that's lacking. Sometimes it's a skills-based skill that isn't there. And then what kind of bridge maintenance training is available? We'll talk about that a little bit. This is AASHTO, NHI, and then some homebred stuff. And then how is it developed? How do you develop curriculum? And then the secondary part of that, how do you actually deliver it? So here's our objectives. We do have partners here. We have a lot of partners across the country, and I think there's even more people that would be interested in being part of some kind of training objective. We also need a collective voice. Part of the problem that we have, of course, is we do so many different things. We work with so many different materials and vendors, and we have so many different needs. There are some crews that are really good at steel work, but don't know too much about repairing concrete beams. But some of those, and they still have that in the inventory, so they need some skills training. And then develop and sharing curriculums. How can we do that here as a group in the Midwest or any of the partnerships, for instance? So what kind of training is needed? Sometimes it's skills, mostly craftsmanship. Sometimes it's a knowledge. I think sometimes the crews can actually they can perform the skill, but it's the knowledge that's missing. So they skip a step, or they don't have the understanding as to why the particular step is important. Safety, of course, we do that all the time. And what we're getting into materials, like how many, yesterday we saw FRPs and galvanic anodes and all kinds of things we never really learned. So we have to learn that on the job or through our careers. Got some curriculum and you want to deliver it, is it really the stuff that's what the people in the audience are really looking for? Of course, it costs money. Training costs money, particularly if you have instructor-led training. Somebody's got to come out and travel. Somebody's going to stay overnight or something, or somebody's going to at least get in the car and go somewhere. So cost and logistics are important considerations. Here's some heat straightening going on here. You can see the V heats. There's two guys on the bottom flange. That was an FHWA course. Delivered, I think he came to New York State 3 times. Delivered and then put in practice by a crew that didn't have any welders or any steel experience whatsoever. They didn't do any steel work, but once they got into the training, they got some equipment, and the engineer helped them get set up, and they went to town. So here's FHWA training. This is available from FHWA. Everybody's familiar with NHI. NHI is fairly expensive, very thorough training. There is a bridge maintenance course that's been updated. GPI was part of that. There is a web-based training also. In fact, there's a prerequisite for the bridge maintenance course. And it's a web-based training. But you can see on the side there that these are some of the courses that are fairly inexpensive. Some are $50. Now there is the last I heard was that these courses here that you see listed, the fairly inexpensive ones, are per computer. It's per hookup. But if you decide to actually use that, I would check first. But per hookup, it's not per person. So you could put one of these modules on your laptop and train 100 of your crew on something. I think there's plan building or NDE type stuff. Concrete series, there's a whole series there. And then there's some free and some inexpensive ones. So that's one idea from web-based training. Then you would be the instructor-led. You would lead the training yourself. There's no curriculum, there's no handouts that goes with that. But it's pretty much, if you took one, if you ever took one on these NHI web-based trainings, there's a series of instructions, and then there's a series of questions. You have to answer the questions before you go on to the next module. So it's thorough. You could do it on your own, but I don't think that would be really what you're striving for. You want to get everybody and discuss topics and get your crews kind of understanding on the same page. NCHRP, it's also from the feds. There's research projects, and we're seeing more and more of these projects coming out as guidelines. We had synthesis, if any familiar working with the AASHTO Subcommittee on Maintenance, there's a Bridge Technical Working Group there, and they have been fairly successful in getting funding for NCHRP projects that are pertinent to bridge maintenance. And some of those are guidelines. One that's recently been put out, I believe it's still available for free, is the maintenance of small movement joints. And then there is one that should be out soon called spot painting to extend highway bridge coating life. Some of that covers, a good portion of that project covers a minimal surface prep and then the types of paints that you could actually put on. So it's actually maintenance related. We're not going to do SP10 with maintenance crews. There are guides. There's an expert task group the FHWA has supports. One of the things that expert task group would like to do is put out pocket guides. There's pocket guides planned for coatings, thin polymer overlays, joints, I think washing and sealing. So a series of those types of activities. Webinars, of course, I'm sure you're all familiar with that, presentations, and then newsletters. This is a page from the NCHRP project, 12100, that's maintaining small movement joints. So there's a lot of discussion. There was some research in there on closed cell foams and some of the material characteristics of some of these joints. There was a survey, satisfaction, who's using what, who's satisfied with what the anticipated service life of the various joints might be, based on what the owners consider. And here's a page, there's a crew. What we tried to do within these guides is put in step-by-step instruction with pictures. So actually the pictures are telling the story, and then what we'd like to do is capture the important point of that picture in the text that's below that. So here they're putting in a bridging plate for an asphalt plug joint, and the real key to that bridging plate is to make sure it lays flat. Otherwise, if it wobbles a bit, you're going to get cracks. FHWA also supports the LTAP program, the Local Technical Assistance Program, for counties and towns and cities, any municipal owners. They have training for crews. There's some training curriculum that they'll bring in instructors for, and they have, and typically, I think they're all run a little different. They're usually out of a university. In New York, it's out of Cornell. Indiana, it's out of Purdue. Minnesota, it's out of U of M. Is it U of M? So it's typically a university. There's, and they have the contacts for a host of all the counties anyway, and all the municipalities and addresses and names and whatnot. That's a pretty valuable tool. They're good. It's a good program. It's an outreach. It's a way to deliver training to counties or the municipalities. So far, the focus, if you look at and I think I do have a slide on what New York has for training, there are not a whole lot of bridge courses. In fact, there's not a whole lot of culvert courses and a whole lot of highway structure courses in those programs. The focus is on a lot of management. You got to consider like a new county engineer has just come in and really it's maybe fresh from school or fresh from some other job. So there's managing snow and ice in the northern climes and pavements, a lot of pavements in those courses. But it's hard to reach so many. So there's a National Association of County Engineers, NACE. Frankly, I haven't really reached out to NACE too much at this point. It's another thing to do to try to deliver training. But there are 3,142 counties in the United States as of 2017. As best that could be counted, I suppose. So it's really difficult to hit to the counties. The counties have to kind of come to you, I think, as far as the delivery. And there's 254 in Texas alone. Partnerships in the TSP2 also are some of the ways to reach some of the locals. These are different programs and not FHWA programs, but it's a way to reach the locals, and I understand that we have a number of them here. So it's a great idea, and I think it's going to be hopefully shared by the other partnerships to bring locals in, as many as you can. And I know there's a need. We want to hear the locals. We have talked about maybe even state agencies, federals, anybody involved in training. Here are some of the courses from the LTAP program. This is out of New York. The LTAP program has a road master program, so the crews are not necessarily looking for CEUs or PDHs. But there is a program to some incentive to become a road master or road scholar. I guess there's different terms but in the different states. But this is what New York has. And I believe if I got it right, you pick 6, you're a road scholar or a road master, and if you go on and get 10 or so, 10 or 12, then you have you're a road scholar or a road professor or something like that. You have another title. I don't believe it means any more money for anybody, but they have training. And you can see the series, the courses that they have here. Again, there's not a whole lot of bridge maintenance, and and I know that we already have curriculum and people that can deliver bridge maintenance related materials that we could add to this list. In fact, the NHI courses, for instance, could be added, I would think. AASHTO is another vehicle, and then the big one there is the NCPP with the TSP2. There's a portal, bridge maintenance portal. Hopefully you guys have seen this page before, that you see the bridge preservation page on the TSP2. TSP2.org, I should actually have that up there. TSP2.org if you haven't been up there yet at that site. And then meetings, we got this right here, conference calls, and it is a national presence. AASHTO is a national presence. And one way to get that voice, that local voice, up into the national level is through these partnerships. If the locals are here, the partnerships, and then the partnerships bring it up to something like an AASHTO subcommittee on maintenance, and then we can bring that up further and try to get funding or research or some kind of other program going on. But there's a way to get some kind of national recognition of a need. AASHTO, the TSP2 also has a training. So far it's been Ed and I, and we've developed modules based on what the LTAP administrators express as a need for their local county and municipality and their local owners. So there's been modules on performance management. Some of that, as we talked about, the FHWA was up here yesterday talking about performance management. We're bringing it down into setting targets, proposing a repair. I know in New York we had a serious problem with what we called red flags or priority repairs, and you try to figure out what those priority repairs are about. You think it's maybe girder ends, and you go and do some research and you find out maybe close to 80% of your work has to do with bad joints, girder ends, pedestals, bad joints. Yeah, does that sound familiar? So you gear up. You gear up for those types of things, and you got to. Then you have a theory on what's going on. You think it's the joints, and then you start gearing up and start inputting new joints. Now you want to see if you're actually making some progress. So are the red flags going down, for instance? So you're looking at measures. You got inputs, outputs, goals. Spot painting is another one. Small movement joints, bridge preservation options, work plans, concrete repairs. So some of the counties, municipalities do have crews. They do have some concept of preservation. Exactly how maybe they could plan that out or how often they've actually done some of that work or scheduled that work, estimated that work, varies from county to county. So some of that is a practice on scheduling repairs, holding on to a particular objective, whether it's saving your preservation, maybe reducing your workload by finding out that girder ends are your problem or your joints are your problem, and then working a program that way. So a bit of a training on that. There's also, AASHTO also has a TC3. I believe there's some kind of change going on here with TC3 and AASHTO. Right now, I believe the courses are still available fairly inexpensively. There's rumors, I'm not sure, I shouldn't even be saying this, but it may become more expensive in the future because I don't really know. I shouldn't be saying it because I really don't know. There's a rumor that somehow AASHTO is going to become more expensive through some kind of organization. But there are some inexpensive courses here too that are a little bit more pertinent. There's a few, I picked out a few out of the long list. So you have bolted connections, that's always a great course when you're dealing with tension instead of torque. Has anybody seen that on the Skidmore? Wilhelm Skidmore, that's a great little 5-minute, really movie is all you really need. Basic construction surveying and plan reading. They also have the publications and lots of courses on pavements again. So here's where we come in. So homeschooling, if you can't find it, you got to make it. Minnesota's done a fantastic job with the Maintenance Academy. They have some manuals out on their table. I highly encourage anybody who's interested in training to look at those manuals. And there is one coming out on the maintenance, yeah, and it was Sarah. Apparently, everybody points to Sarah. But Maine also has, I think all the states are doing something on the training. Maine has a bridge maintenance college, and the New York State Thruway actually had, they would pay a supervisor 50 cents more an hour if they were doing OJT. They're on the site, perhaps, maybe they're forming. If the supervisor feels that he has to take some time off and do some training right there, he gets an extra 50 cents an hour. Unfortunately, that program's been done away with, but that's an idea to get the OJT. And then retired part-time people. BOCES, we brought in some welding instructors from BOCES, and here you see some guys just burning rod to try to get their welding certification. Vendors, and we have them here in the room, brown bag lunches. Everyone will say that they'll come out, every vendor will say they'll come out and talk with you and talk to your crews, train your inspectors, train anybody. But 3,000 counties, and it's kind of difficult to hit all those counties. Demonstrations, here's a bunch of demonstrations, some pictures, shop and field demos, and you can actually do some real repair work with some donated materials with a demo. There's some pictures here of a bridge fair. We would bring, there was some vendors were willing to travel. We would go to a county facility with almost like a circus of vendors, something John Hooks is talking about on the national demonstrations, but we would have maybe 12 vendors come in. We'd be in a shop, and we would cover things from shotcreting to polymers to whatever it might be, silenes, whatever. It's kind of difficult. It's like a whole traveling circus to move around, the next week, and then stage it, and then the seating for the crews and whatnot, but it's a way to do it. And then you can also have stuff right out there on the field. You can see a bunch of people standing around. This is usually where the public goes by honking, throwing, sending you messages, hand gestures, because so many people are standing around. But actually, it's a demo. It's a training. It's a classroom. One of the most innovative things I've seen, you guys have probably seen this already, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. This is for a header on a joint. So this is a urethane product, two-part urethane products mixed with a pump and a nozzle, and or just fill in the header that's gap-graded aggregate, 3/8 inch gap-graded aggregate, and the polymer goes in till it's floated to the top, and it cures out fairly quickly. Urethane product cures fairly quickly, and you have a header. Nobody's ruining their knees or their steel-toe shoes. All right, to wrap up, generally the training needs are not being met. I think we have some support. I have some support for that idea. It's a constant thing. I think you can say that with anything. I think teachers would say the same thing. The training needs are not being met. The focus is on the skills and knowledge base and relevant materials in short supply. There isn't something you can just pull out of the shelf or out of the library. It really has to be an effort to keep it towards a bridge maintenance, keep it within the bounds of what a bridge maintenance effort is. Otherwise, it gets too big, but still be relevant and have some important information, and otherwise it gets ignored. And then the idea is to look around, like how can you deliver that training? And there are ideas out there. So you have methods, you have partners, and they're here. They're in the other partnerships, certainly the vendors. They're certainly all around, and you can be innovative on how you can deliver that training. So I know we're sending out CEUs for this, so I got some questions for you folks to get your, half credit, quarter credit for this presentation. So name some of the partners the bridge maintenance community could collaborate with to develop and deliver relevant training bridge maintenance to bridge maintenance crews. Any ideas? All right, very good. What training needs do you have? There's no you in there, but so do you know what your training needs are, really? What are the crews, sometimes it's a movement. Sometimes I mentioned that crew that really wasn't versed in steel, got some training in steel, and suddenly they're tackling these steel projects. What is it your program is missing, or where would you like to lead your crews? And then what training materials do you have to share? So the idea is that we're all in this together. It's the same work. There's joint problems pretty across the country, I think. So there's nothing new. And I'm just going to, in closing, bridge preservation is ahead. I think we've come a long way over the years. Yesterday's presentations had galvanic anodes and FRPs in it, and there's a lot of, people had to learn something about those things because we didn't learn that when we started. Thank you very much. Is there any questions?
I think the training begins and ends with a list of core competencies that are targeted in terms of, what you want them to be able to do and so on and so forth. And I'm just wondering if such a list exists pertaining to specific solution offerings, like you follow where I'm coming from? For example, if we're doing spot painting, all right, you've got a nice little handbook that you're working on right now, but how do you validate that someone's actually understood it? Like how do you close that loop?
Yeah. Well, yeah, understanding and actually and useful. So if it's being used, I guess, if it's referred to, if it stays in the truck as opposed to on the bookshelf.
Like, how do you say, it's not like a report card, but just a detailed list of core competencies that you want the participant to be able to understand and achieve? I mean, how do you close the loop? I'm not talking about a test, but
Well, I imagine feedback right from the class. It's certainly before you actually give it to the class, it's vetted through some other people, to see whether if you captured what's necessary, and then the feedback from the group that's going through the training.
The preceding video was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found at TSP2.org. That's TSP2.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.